So let's talk about AI.
Let's do it.
All right. So
My
what?
favorite topic.
Yeah. So what was it that got you into AI in general? Like what got you interested?
Yeah, so when ChatGPT was first announced, this is like 2 years ago now. I probably like a lot of people out there, I just hopped into the tool and I just started asking it questions, and then I realized it can answer like any question that I could throw at it. So from there, it was just, an exercise of pushing the boundaries and seeing what it knows, what it doesn't know, how I can get it to actually either give me stuff like advice I can use in my real life, or actually use like the text output from it and use that for something else. Um, so yeah, that's how it all started, and that rabbit hole is what got me here today.
Yeah. So the interesting thing is for a lot of people that I work with, whether it's like coaching, training, facilitating, um, regardless of what it is, there's still a vast majority of people that remember a world without the internet,
Mm,
right? And
can't
like,
relate. Can't relate.
yeah, I know, right?
1995, born in
Yeah,
95.
exactly, exactly. And like I see that in my kids, like
Mm,
it's a native language to them.
mm-hmm.
And I was fortunate that when I was growing up, that I came into the whole internet era at a time when I was kind of like late adolescence,
Right,
right? Like when I
right.
was in elementary school, middle school, the internet wasn't even like nobody had computers at home,
Yeah.
and when we did, I remember before computers, before you would have a mouse, right? Like
Wow.
everything was on the keyboard. And like, so the thing that's interesting, and this is, I think, not just for people that can remember a world from the 1900s, right? They can
Mm-hmm.
remember a world without the internet, but
Mm-hmm.
also there's also companies that have existed most of their history without the internet. So there's like all of these fears around things like privacy,
Yeah.
safety, intellectual property,
Yeah.
right?
Big one.
So do you see that being the same? What would you say is like the fear level, or is there even a fear level around those sorts of things as far as you're concerned, like generationally?
Yeah, I know I see a lot of posts from people back home, or, my friends that aren't into AI, and their general take is like they don't like AI if it is stealing other people's art and just regurgitating
Right.
art, for example. They don't like that. If it's a book, for example, and it's regurgitating passages from a book,
Mm.
I think we can all sort of agree like, all right, person who wrote the book wants it to be sold. They didn't want it to be trained in an AI model. They didn't consent to that.
Right.
Same thing with the art, and there is a fear, and that's why this whole there's a rise of responsible AI, which is the idea that only train your AI on stuff that is publicly available or that is in the public domain.
Mhm.
So, for example, Adobe Firefly, that's like one of the first image generation tools from Adobe. They only train their image model based off of publicly available or stuff that they own the rights to.
Right.
So not just the public internet. So that's like part of the responsible AI movement. And there's huge waves going on. You can get a job in responsible AI. You can also choose to ignore it though. Like someone like me, I just use the tools that already exist out there. So I tend to sort of leave that to other people.
Yeah.
The whole topic of generative AI, you can divide it into many, many domains of expertise. I only focus on this one, which is like for personal productivity,
Yeah.
basically.
But isn't so when I hear responsible AI,
Hmm.
I also hear slow AI,
Mm,
right? Because it's like if I have a closed model, then I don't have the same inputs, but I also don't
absolutely.
have the same biases, right?
Hmm.
Because the
Hmm.
question I always ask, like even when it's just like a piece of research that comes from even Dale Carnegie or Gallup or Harvard Business, the question I'm always asking is like, what was the bias of the people who were doing the research, right?
Yeah.
What's the sample set? What's the control
Hmm.
set, right?
Hmm.
and and so like as an example, I was in a I was in a AI summit, and I was listening to this panel, and there was a high school teacher, a college professor, someone that was from military personnel, leader in the military, and then also someone that was in like the responsible AI space, and
Mm-hmm.
then someone that was like kind of had more of the position of like, look, they're gonna get your info, so like it's either now or later, so there's no
Hey.
need, right? And so one of the questions that went to the college professor was from the audience. The question was, it was something like, you know, are you afraid of what this does to young adults' ability to learn? Right.
Big one.
It's the same thing
Big one.
like before the internet, when people used to, like our teachers used to go, you can't use a calculator because you're not gonna always have a calculator with you in your pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Turns out
Turns out
I do.
I do.
You
Yeah.
know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so a lot of those things that they said wouldn't be true before are true now. But then this professor was like, I'm really afraid not to what it's doing to their ability to learn, but their ability to think,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
And like,
Yes.
and then that question went from that person to the military person. And this was like the scary part for me, because the military person goes, yeah, I'm afraid of it. But what I'm more afraid of is that if we don't put our foot on the gas pedal, our enemies are putting their foot on the gas pedal,
Yeah.
right? And so we are disadvantaging ourselves. So it's like, I don't want to do this,
Mm-hmm.
but if we don't, they do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, AI is being used for like weapons systems and stuff
Yeah,
like that, as it is for in any domain of knowledge
right.
or your profession. Regarding the learning, that's a big one. That's a big one. AI puts us in this unique situation where we can do basically anything and have no idea how we did it.
Yeah,
So we can, for example, write a paper about something, publish it, post it online, and someone can come back and roast us on it because it's completely false,
hmm,
fabricated. The AI might have hallucinated, and we're not an expert, so we didn't know. We just shared out the result.
yeah,
Um, there's kind of like a framework whenever you're working with AI. It's like if you can validate the output, you're safe to basically copy and paste it, use the output for something in real life.
what do you mean by validate?
If you are an expert in IT and you ask it for a summary of how virtualization works or something, then and you're like, oh, I know this is how it works. This just did like I would have spent 10 minutes writing this thing up, but ChatGPT does it in 10 seconds. Look at this, it all looks good. I can, share this with my team to teach them how virtualization works.
Mm,
Um, on the other end, it's like yeah, what a lot of people do, right? Is they just copy and paste. It looks chat GPT, people can tell
yeah,
text that's generated from AI. It has certain giveaway phrases that are really deeply embedded into the models. And so not only it looks like tacky, but also the information could just be wrong.
yeah, yeah. And it makes you look like a liar,
It makes you look like a liar.
right? There's
Yes.
nothing where, and this is something that drives me crazy, like on LinkedIn in general, is like,
LinkedIn is a big one.
well, when you see someone that you know them,
Hmm.
and then you see them writing articles or like long form posts on LinkedIn, and it's
Yeah.
like, not only does that not sound like them,
Hmm.
the like tone, word usage, nothing is consistent with how I've experienced them. And the
Yeah.
incongruence to me is a huge hit to my ability to see them as credible,
Yeah.
for me to respect them,
Their
for me
integrity.
a
Their
hundred percent
integrity,
is
for sure.
so how do you, so then if you can validate it, if you know it already,
Hmm.
then why would you need AI to begin with?
Yeah, yeah. So AI gives you like compounding returns on your time investment when you're working with something. So if say for example I'm starting a business from scratch. Well I guess that's not a good example because that's something that you don't know. So if it's something that you do know,
Well,
one of the
you might know the business, but you might not. Well, you might know the product.
yeah.
So, like as an example, my background, like growing up, was furniture, right?
Hmm.
So, like I know furniture,
Yeah.
but if I had only worked in a furniture store, and I didn't know how to run the furniture business
Mm-hmm.
on the business side of it. Maybe is that an example?
Yeah, yeah. So what I'm thinking is one of the things I'm working on is like the concept of a second brain. So it's
Yeah.
like personal knowledge management. How do you take notes? Most people traditionally do it with a pen and paper, right? But there's limitations to that.
Mhm.
So what you can do is use like a tool like Notion or OneNote or Evernote or Obsidian or whatever you use as your digital note-taking app. You can have ChatGPT or your chatbot of choice on the other side of your screen, and you can sort of start to build this second brain or this knowledge base for yourself. And then you can use like, for example, like if we're starting a business, I might ask AI to generate a business plan for me based on certain things. I might tell it the current status, where the company's located, how much money we have to spend every month, how many employees do we have, what do they do? That could be in another note.
Mm.
And, you can imagine there's another one for the products you sell, etc.
Right.
And what AI can help you do is like if you can reuse those outputs, the business plan, the current status, etc., and you can feed that into the AI again and then just continue to build off that and learn
Mm.
more from that.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's sort of what I'm
Yeah,
thinking.
that makes sense. Cause and actually I was doing that for I actually just did this. So it was about 2 weeks ago. I needed to have some data around some real estate decisions we were making.
Hmm.
And really it was trying to establish a reasonable cost per square foot for
Mm,
some like commercial real estate properties.
yeah,
And there wasn't any comps that were within 15 or 20 miles. So it's like there's no
nothing to
comps,
compare against.
right? And
Yeah.
I knew the market had changed significantly
Hmm.
because the comps have changed everywhere in
Yes.
most cities, much less here in Raleigh.
Hmm.
So I'm looking at this thing and like, okay, so how do I figure this out?
Mm,
So I figured out, okay, so what do I need to know to establish a comp? Well, I knew those answers. I knew the inputs. I just didn't know the outputs.
hmm.
Right.
Hmm.
And I came up with the data that I would have paid
A
someone in the really,
consultant, a
yeah,
lot of money
I
for.
would have paid probably $1,500,
Hmm.
$2,000 for this report
Hmm.
that I got the data I needed within, you know, 7 minutes.
Yeah,
You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Um,
So it's like,
that was
were you
huge.
comfortable with the number it gave you? Or did
Um,
you think like this is a good start? I need to kind of tweak it a little.
so, well, this was a big light bulb for me because I didn't have the number. I just needed I needed average household income.
Mm,
I needed to know an approximation of how many cars pass by that location on a daily basis. I needed to
mm.
know how that compared from this year to a decade ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, 2 years ago, a year ago, right?
Wow,
So
interesting.
like those are the inputs I needed along with a few other things,
Hmm.
as well as like registered businesses and LLCs within a 40-mile radius, right? So I needed all those things. So then I got it, and then I
Hmm.
was like, okay, so now I have data,
Yeah,
but I still don't have my answer,
you still don't
right?
have, yeah.
So then I took the data and then re-inputted,
Hmm.
right, the data, and then asked to come up with a dollar per an average dollar per market value dollar per square foot,
Hmm.
and then
Hmm.
it gave it to me, and then I made it for the next few minutes. I made it defend its position,
Yeah,
basically, right?
yeah.
So
Which
I
is what you're going to be asked to do.
100%,
Hmm.
a hundred
Hmm.
percent. So then I was able to take that and then ask it to create a infographic
Hmm.
that that was something I could send to our marketing team
Hmm.
to make their job much faster, right? So not so then when I'm presenting this not only to our marketing team, our property management team, but also I'm training or communicating or giving them the message on how we defend it
Yeah,
when 100% of the time, no matter even if we were 75% below market rate, the person who comes and views a property is always going to ask for a discount,
yeah,
right? So we
yeah.
still have to be able to defend it, even if it's a great price point.
Hmm.
So we can start with a place to say, here's our logic as to why this property is being offered at 15% below what the comparable market is,
Hmm.
even
Hmm.
though there's no comps,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
Can I make an
Yeah,
observation? So you did two things right there, which is you did two things right there, which is number one, you have experience already in that space.
yeah,
So you're not just again, you're not just copy and pasting the output to your team and saying, all right, here's what we got. You validated it first.
hmm
So that's probably, again, something that you might have come to yourself anyway.
hmm
And how long, how much money it would have taken you? A lot. So the other thing is that you gave it a lot of context.
hmm
So you gave it all the inputs, right?
hmm
And that's something that a lot of people complain about this AI, didn't give me the result I wanted, or it's not as in depth, or not as accurate as I wanted it. But what you did is you already knew the inputs that would lead to the output that you want. You
right,
knew that you needed these, how many people drive by, etc. So if you just give AI a one sentence prompt and you say, how much should I make this place? How much
right.
should I price this place? Well, you're probably going to get an answer that's not too great. But if you tell it, everything that you know, and again, like what you're exactly asking for, what kind of output you want, then you're much likely to get a more accurate
Yeah,
answer.
yeah. So that brings me to this idea of customization, right?
Mm,
Because especially like as I am thinking about how I position myself to be mentored by other people, and also
smart people like me.
yeah, exactly,
Yeah, yeah.
and also how I am coaching people to mentor and be mentored.
Right.
One of the things that I talk about a lot is that the last thing that we should be doing is asking people just their advice,
Mm,
right? Like never ask for advice because the advice is disembodied, right? So like if I
mm,
say to you, like, hey, I'm having this problem. What's your advice? You're going to give me your advice based on your personality, your lived experience, your skill sets,
mm-hmm,
your preferred way to communicate,
mm-hmm.
your whether you're introverted, extroverted, whether you're more passive or more bold, right, more
That's the
assertive,
context.
right, 100%. So it
Yeah.
lacks context and it's disembodied from my experience.
Mm-hmm,
So then if you just go do this, that's my advice. And I go, cool. And I go and I do exactly what you say. And I have a success. The downside is I don't get to take credit because it
mm,
wasn't my idea,
mm.
right? It was your
Yeah.
idea. So now I become beholden to you
Mm-hmm.
for my next victory,
Yeah.
right? What's worse is if you give me the advice and I just go do it and I don't have a success, then I don't have to take responsibility
Yeah. Yeah.
because I can go, man, that dude Ben is an idiot.
Yeah.
He gives terrible advice, right? So I
Mm-hmm.
don't have to take responsibility and I don't get the credit, right?
There's so many YouTube gurus that tell you how they did it, but it's not applicable to the average person.
Right.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
so common.
So what I see with when that how that translates to AI
Mm,
is if I'm trying to figure out how to solve a let's say an interpersonal problem, right? I'm having an issue with my manager. And I go to ChatGPT and I go, I've got to have a tough conversation with my manager that I don't have a great relationship with. What's the best way for me to do it?
mm,
And it's gonna give me an answer,
mhm.
but that answer might work better for you than it would me.
Yeah.
It might work, and it might not work as well for someone who is male, female, depending on age, depending on personality, depending on their
What department
predisposition.
you work in,
That's
what
right. That's
company
right.
you work
Or
for,
who the manager
who the
is, right?
manager
They
is.
may have earned the bad, the
Hmm.
person may have earned the bad relationship. Well, it may be
Yeah.
because you come in late, you leave early, and you steal while you're there,
Yeah.
right? That's why you have a bad
But
relationship.
you didn't tell
That you didn't tell the
the
input, right?
yeah, yeah.
So, so one of the things, the way that maybe translates back to the mentorship conversation is that instead of asking for advice, the what we coach toward is you ask other people for their experiences, meaning
Hmm.
you're asking them for stories.
Hmm.
Because I had a one of my I like to say that my chosen father, not the father I got, but the father that I chose.
Yeah.
Um, one thing that he would always say is that if a picture is worth 1,000 words, then a story is worth 1,000 pictures. Right. So if I say to you, hey, look,
Mm,
man, I'm having a tough time with my manager. I'm not really sure what to do. have you ever had an experience when you had a tough relationship with someone that you were accountable to,
Yeah.
and then what happened, and you go, no, then I know that you're not the right person to
Not the
talk
right
to,
guy.
right?
Yeah,
But if
yeah.
you say yes,
Hmm.
then then and you tell me a story about that, then I can translate that story into my personality, into my situation, into my context, right? So
Hmm.
then when I go do something, it's my idea because I translated it,
Hmm. Hmm.
right? And then I get to take credit for a victory,
Yeah.
and I have to take responsibility for failure. I can't
Yeah.
blame you because you didn't give me advice.
Yeah.
You just gave me context,
Hmm.
right? You helped me think, and that's really what good mentors or good coaches do, right? They
Hmm.
don't have conversations with people that end in advice. They have conversations with people, or they create environments so that people can have conversations with themselves that they couldn't otherwise have,
Yeah,
right?
a lot of being a good manager, right? Similar, character traits. It's
100%.
like asking questions to make the person come to the realization themselves, not
Right.
telling them how to do the job.
1,000%.
Teaching them how to ask those questions of themselves,
Yes.
rather than just telling them do one, two, three, because
Right.
then they don't have the framework upon which to operate in the future.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. Because and there's this weird like ego thing that happens with us that it feels good for people to come to us and want us to tell them the answers,
Yeah.
but it also creates exponent. There's a compounding exponential problem of, time suck
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
happens, right? Because then if that's how you operate, then everyone does that, right?
Yeah.
So
You've trained your employees or your, mentees essentially to come to you when they have a problem.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. So the way that sort of relates to customization, and something I've found a lot of value in, especially with Chat GPT,
Mm.
is customizing kind of the back end for
Oh,
me so that
yes.
it knows who I am, it knows what I've written, it knows links to other content,
Yes.
and I name that content. So in my Chat GPT, it's called DS style, right?
Hmm.
Doug Stewart style.
Yeah.
So I'll say, knowing DS style,
Hmm.
what advice would you give? Or what are some examples? Or what are some options?
Yeah.
And what I found is over time, and making sure that my inputs are specific, the outputs are a lot more valuable
Yeah.
and actionable, right? So
Totally
what
agree.
and
Totally agree.
so what are your thoughts around best practices you've seen, and how to maybe think about starting that
Yeah.
for people on average?
Yeah. That is one of the most powerful features of generative AI, especially the chatbot stuff, which is what I'm personally interested in,
Mm-hmm.
is stuff like custom instructions. Custom instructions are a feature in ChatGPT, which have been around for over a year now. So you go into your settings, you put, I think it's what you want the AI to know about you and how you want it to respond.
That's right.
So for me, I say, what my role is, what I have going on in my life and what my goals are. And then I ask how I want it to respond. I'm like, steer everything so that you give direct, actionable advice to a lot of this stuff. Um, yeah, it's customization is really important. Uh, it's again this unique situation where AI can sort of act as a fill-in mentor, a not an ideal one, but it certainly again it can do almost anything. You can be a mentor. It can tell you how to cut your grass in your lawn. It can tell you how to do anything. So it'll give you an answer if you ask for it to be your mentor. But
But
the question
everyone
is,
in Walmart will too.
everyone on Walmart will too. Everyone on
Like
Walmart, yeah,
anybody that you walk by is happy to tell you what you should do.
yeah, yeah.
The quality of the responses, results may vary.
Absolutely, absolutely. Customization is like the biggest thing. And that's how you can get results that like text that is more natural sounding too. You can ask the AI to write at a high school reading level or a middle school reading level, which is how I typically talk. Um, I don't know, maybe I'm using highfalutin words here. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't really
No,
think
I don't.
about it,
Yeah,
but
because well, one thing is I'm thinking about the way I've customized on my side is I've said, because I the last thing I want to do is read like pages of text
Hmm.
when I just want to get to an answer or an insight,
Yeah.
right? So mine is like keep your responses as concise as possible
Mm.
and supply sources um, and links to sources
It can search
with
the web.
every
It can
right
search the web.
with every single thing,
Hmm.
right? So when I'm because the other thing is that every there is a bias,
Yeah.
right? And the problem is we don't know where the bias is
Mm.
because all of the if it's searching the web, that means, and I'd be interested in your opinion on this, if it's searching the web, there's not always a way for AI to disseminate whether the information that it's pulling from is accurate,
Yeah.
disinformation, misinformation, or
Hmm.
just straight just crazy stuff. You know what I mean?
100%. 100%.
So if I know there's a bias, the problem is that I don't know where the bias is,
Hmm.
right? I just know it's there somewhere,
Yeah.
and I don't know which outputs are biased and which ones
Yeah.
aren't biased. But up to this point, AI has been informed by human inputs, but at some point, AI will be informed by AI inputs,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because it's also creating its own
Which brings up a whole
information.
new set of challenges.
Right,
Yeah. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. So the first thing is just if you're looking at just the large language model itself and you pretend you can't search the web, for example,
And large language model means,
it's just the brain behind a chatbot.
okay,
And it's really hard for even people who are machine learning experts to like look under the hood and determine why it chose one word over the
yeah,
other or why it hallucinated or something like that. It's really hard because the architecture, like the back end of these large language models is really complex
mm,
and it just goes through so many layers of transformations. It's hard to tell what's fact and what's fiction. In general, when you augment your prompt and you say search the web, you will get a more accurate response. So typically, if I'm doing something, if I'm learning about something for a professional purpose, I typically go to perplexity.ai. It's a different website. It's just like ChatGPT, but it augments all of the responses with sources, like you mentioned. And it's in general, like I haven't noticed anything where it pulled like a weird source, but it totally could do that. It's reading from like 20 websites
sure.
for every response it gives. So I typically go to that, and I've noticed the accuracy is much better on Perplexity when when you're doing a web search with the normal response from the
Right.
AI model. Um, yeah.
So, because like one thing that came to mind when you were saying that is I did uh, I think I've coached 6 or 7 different people for their TEDx talks,
Mm,
right? And one that I did a few years ago was a guy who was a researcher,
yeah.
and he got a request to submit a for a medical journal.
Yeah.
And so what he did was he was like, I don't think this journal is legitimate.
Mm,
And because it's not uncommon for people to sort of make pretend that they are a legitimate journal.
yeah.
They reach out to these researchers, and usually they're kind of in the last phases of their college experience, and they'll go, "Hey, if you give us $500, we'll let you contribute." And so people will go,
Nice.
"Oh, I get to be published. That's
I
amazing,
didn't
right?"
know that, but now you're gonna start seeing a lot more papers published by
Yeah,
me.
yeah. So what happens is they'll do it, and they'll use these that are like sort of legitimate,
Mhm.
but then in between all of those inputs or in all of those journal entries, they will put disinformation
Mm,
and misinformation to confuse and conquer to for a particular nefarious agenda,
yeah,
or some people just do it just to do it, and it's a way for them to make money,
yeah,
right? And so what he did is he went, I want to see if this thing's really for real. So he sent him the money, and he wrote his input for this journal, and it was like the first line was like, I just want to start this by saying none of this is real, all of this is fake. I have no credibility in this space, and I'm going to make up everything else. And he made up some of the like
Wow.
how like he made up things that don't even exist.
Mm-hmm.
He used words that aren't even words, right?
Nice.
And they published it,
Great.
right? And so he kind of uncovered this whole like this issue of how people are creating disinformation,
Mm-hmm.
and that's something we saw through COVID,
Yeah.
right? Where you could regardless of what you wanted to believe,
Mm-hmm.
you could find evidence of it on the internet,
Vaccines
right?
cause autism. That was a study that was published in a journal. But later, through the scientific process, we figured out, okay, that's actually not true. This one standalone study found this thing. All the other studies that we've done don't support that.
Mm. Yeah, or vaccines don't cause autism. You can find evidence of that. Or vaccines cause you to grow, an ear out of your forehead.
Yeah.
Like you could find anything you want.
hmm
So if there is as much untrue information online, how do we have some sort of assurance or confidence
Yes.
that we're not playing with bad information?
Yeah, and the AI models, they're all trained off of mostly data from the internet. So that it makes it, a prime candidate for this. It could definitely fall under that influence. That is where the human expertise and the lived experience is going to shine, in my
Mm.
opinion. So yeah, there's at a certain point, like you mentioned, there's going to be stop. There's going to not be enough information to continue training the models.
Right.
You're going to have to create AI generated content and then train the models based off of that. There's some argument that that can cause model collapse, which basically means that the more you train AI on AI's own output, the more nonsensical it gets. And so that's called model collapse. So that is like a very real thing that AI researchers are looking into.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's almost like, and I know I'm dating me and not you here, but it's almost like AI's version of Y2K,
Y2K,
right?
Y2K. Yep.
Oh, that's interesting. I've never heard of that.
Yeah, model collapse. Yeah. Um, yeah, there's arguments to be made either way. Some people think it's a possibility. Some people think that by virtue of it just being text like how humans would write it anyway, that it
Mhm.
wouldn't matter. So there's two sides to the coin. So
Does AI, to your understanding, does AI prioritize human inputs over AI inputs?
it doesn't. It just learns based off of a huge, vast amount of text you give it, and it just does pattern prediction. So it just predicts what the most likely word based off of all of its training data is.
Mm.
So it weighs it all pretty equally, is how I understand it.
So let's talk safety for a second
Yeah.
then. So because and I don't know this answer. So me and my wife have always been very, very careful about the access to the internet that we've allowed our kids to have,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And there's like this, to me, there's like a balance, right? So I think it's the wrong decision for us as parents to say we don't want our kids to have any exposure to the internet
Mm.
because, when people are like, you can't just watch TV for 8 hours a day, those screens will ruin you. Well,
Yeah.
I look at a screen for 8 hours a day. You
Yeah.
know what I mean? Like
Up
when I'm at
close.
work. Yeah, yeah. So like that's how work is done, is
Yeah.
in front of screens. A lot of work, not all, but a lot, right?
hmm
And so it's like I don't want them to have none, but they
hmm
definitely can't have free reign
Mm.
because the data is really, really clear for what just free reign of the internet does to kids.
Yeah.
And kids' natural curiosity will get them in a lot of trouble and expose them to things that they are not intellectually or emotionally ready for,
Yeah, we
right?
we haven't evolved to for our brains to comprehend all the stuff that we're seeing. And so when we get these like really quick dopamine hits that like the internet gives us, we just want more, more, more.
Yeah.
That's one example. Another example is like the bad content they could consume, right?
hmm Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like I want my 6-year-old right now to know that babies come from a mommy's stomach,
hmm
I don't want him yet to know what it looks like for a
Yeah.
baby to be conceived.
Yeah.
You
They
know,
don't
you
need
know
to
what I'm
know
saying?
that.
Like
Yeah. Yeah.
that's not what he's ready for.
Hmm.
So I want to protect my kids in the best way that I know how,
So
right?
are you kind of drawing a comparison between like the internet gives you access to everything
Mm-hmm.
in a way. You could search for whatever you want. And in the same way, the large language models, they have almost everything loaded into them and kind of what should be the boundary there.
Yeah, because like if I were to ask ChatGPT how to get away with murder,
Hmm.
it's not going to tell me.
No, you just have to ask if
You got
my
to ask.
grandma was telling me a bedtime story about how to get away with murder,
That's right.
then it'll
Then it
tell
would
you.
tell me. Right, 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 right.
Yeah.
But it also like as an example, and maybe a good comparison here is I wasn't ready to give my daughter a phone
Hmm.
when she was 10.
Hmm.
All of her not all, a lot of her friends had one, right?
Yeah,
And then she was also away from us more. She was over at friends' houses, she was at a volleyball tournaments or whatever, and we wanted to be able to communicate with her
absolutely.
and also kind of know where she was or whatever. So the alternative for us is instead of getting her a phone, I got her an Apple Watch. Right.
Mm,
So it doesn't have, she can't browse the internet the same way. She
right,
can't,
right.
she can't, there's not as, it's harder, it takes a dedicated effort to get yourself in trouble
Yeah,
with an Apple Watch as compared to an iPhone,
yeah,
right? So is that the same thing as ChatGPT versus Chrome or
yeah,
Safari or TikTok or Instagram? You know what I mean?
yeah. There's a really close comparison we can draw. So in ChatGPT, it's run by a company, OpenAI, and they have a responsible AI commitment. So they say, you know, if you ask like these bad questions, right, how to get away with murder, how to build a bomb or whatever, it's going to deny your request because that's
Right.
built into the prompt that it basically says, don't help people with that type of thing. People ask you that, politely decline. So that's why, again, the responsible AI stuff I typically leave to other people to sort out how their tools are going to be responsible.
Mhm.
Um, on the other hand, there are open source models, which are not owned by a single company. They are um, software that anyone can download and use, and also anyone can contribute to make it better. So
Mm.
it's kind of a double-edged sword where anyone on the internet can contribute to this thing, but at the same time, a lot of them have no guardrails. And that's on purpose because what's right to me may not be
Right.
right to you.
Right.
Think about all the hot button political issues. The country's divided 50-50 on like 8 different issues.
Mhm.
So, how do you what does OpenAI tell ChatGPT to do in that situation? If do they load it with the information that abortion um is ethical or unethical?
Right.
Because if someone is asking for ChatGPT's advice, then that is a very real impact it could have.
Hmm.
So that's where the bias comes in, right?
Yeah.
And that's where the open source models come in. And a lot of people villainize the open source stuff and they say like, bad people are going to use this
You see it like the dark web.
at like the dark
Right.
web. And it kind of is in a way. But at the same time, it opens up a broader conversation for ethics. What's gonna be your guardrails for your AI model? Um, so yeah, it goes back to the bias stuff.
Yeah. Then
Yeah.
the other thing that comes to mind is like the code of ethics.
Hmm.
Is it really ethical? Are they really responsible?
Yeah.
It's kind of like the Hippocratic oath that doctors take.
Do no harm.
Right. But then there was a lot of opioids prescribed by doctors that took that oath. You know
In
what I mean?
in Canada, doctors will kill you if you sign a paper and say
Yeah,
you
yeah,
want them to
this is
kill
what I
you.
want. Right,
Yeah.
right.
Mhm.
And so we've seen, and that's not a knock necessarily on the medical
Right.
industry
Yeah.
because it's happened in banking, it's happened in
Hmm.
finance, it's happened in manufacturing, it's happened in weapons, it's happened in, right. It
Everything.
happens everywhere. So at what point can we, and this is a question that I ask myself all the time, is there a point that I can feel comfortable going, yeah, I trust that they're doing the right things for the right reasons because
Hmm.
most companies are out to make a profit first,
Hmm.
and it's not so much about doing the right thing as it is not getting put in prison,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
So
Getting caught doing the wrong thing.
that's right.
Hmm.
That's right. So
Yeah.
it's not that I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm just, and it kind of goes back to like what is morality, right? Like
Hmm.
morality isn't when a person does not, it's not when they're just because they've been faithful to their significant other. That doesn't mean they're moral.
Hmm.
If they've had no opportunities to be unfaithful, it just means
They
that
existed.
that's right.
Yeah.
It just means no one else wants to sleep with them.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
doesn't mean they're moral,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Moral means you had the opportunity to do wrong
Hmm.
and you made the choice to do right,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And there has to be that decision point that happens. And I don't know that we know enough yet about AI to be able to accurately decide,
Yeah. Do we want AI to make decisions for us? Probably yes. We want it to automate boring stuff for us, like mowing our lawn or like renaming files or making a table for us from a paragraph or
right?
something.
Or
Yes, we want.
deciding which lasagna recipe.
That's what I ask on my way home from work all the time. But I say like I have these ingredients. What should I make for dinner? But
Yeah.
yeah, and it's like, do we want AI to be making all these ethical decisions for us? Probably not. There's probably a line we want to draw in the sand where we say, okay, humans are the arbiters of the ethics, discussion. AI is simply a tool in that sense.
Mm,
There's other parts of our lives that are boring and suck the life out of us that we do want AI to automate.
mm,
So where do we draw the line there? It's still
yeah.
open for debate. I think most people want it to do as much as possible, um, but then, you get into a little dicey territory there. Like, hey, if it starts writing all your emails, going back to what we were first talking about, you start to look like a fraud.
Hmm.
Do we want to have an AI girlfriend? It's like some people on the internet want that. And it's like, at a certain point, we have to draw the line.
Yeah. In that case, you're just asking to be a deity,
Mm,
not a human,
not a human.
right?
Exactly.
Hmm.
And so I want to ask you, like, you can use AI as a mentor,
Mhm.
right? If you have no one else to go to, maybe you're lonely and alone, you can't afford therapy or something, you can use AI and ask, like, yeah, I'm going dealing with this difficult situation. I've no one else to talk to. What do you think I should do? Um, but where do you think that line should be drawn for that purpose?
Yeah. So, and it's interesting that this is before AI was a thing. I did my TEDx talk in 2016 on
Right.
mentorship. It's the
Yes.
first time that I publicly talked about it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And one of the 5.5 mentors was the digital mentor,
Mm,
right? And so I made the case in that talk and later in my book that we have access to more information than has ever existed for any other generation,
yeah.
right? And so we have the writings of Marcus Aurelius, and we know the story of Gandhi and Mother Teresa and Abraham Lincoln and and Jesus and Muhammad. Like we have all of this information,
Hmm.
and it's a huge waste to only use the internet to play games,
Yeah.
right? And so, should it be the only place that we get it? No.
Mm,
Is it a incredibly valuable place? Because as someone who was born in the 1900s, I grew up hearing knowledge is power,
hmm.
right? And my belief is knowledge is infinitely less powerful today than it's ever been because it's been commoditized,
Mm.
right? Like it was like, I don't know, it was maybe a month ago. My daughter comes into the living room, asked me, I don't even remember what the question was, but she asked me a
Why is the
question.
sky blue or something?
Yeah. No, it was like a legitimate question that
Okay.
I knew the answer to.
Ah.
I told her the answer. I teach communication for a living. So
Hmm.
I know that my delivery of that answer was delivered with conviction and confidence and appropriate tone, gesture, facial expression. It was congruent, right?
Hmm.
There was no reason for her to doubt it.
Yeah.
And as she was walking upstairs, she happened to have her iPad, and I heard her go, "Hey Siri," and she fact checked me walking upstairs.
Wow.
So so
Wow.
my deduction of that was she wasn't coming to me because she didn't have any other way to get the information.
Mm-hmm.
She wanted to know whether I knew the answer. She was
Mm.
checking my credibility,
Your credibility, yeah,
right?
yeah.
She wasn't pursuing, because when I was her age, when I was 13, if I wanted information, I had to go into the living room of our house. I had to open the credenza. There was a bunch of green books that were all alphabetized,
Mm-hmm.
and I had to find it in the Encyclopedia Britannica.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
if it didn't have the information that I was looking for, I had to go and deal with I had to leave my house and go deal with this creation of the devil himself, the Dewey Decimal System at the library.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
wow. Yeah.
And that didn't always have the information that you needed.
Mm-hmm.
But today, the universe's information is in every single person's pocket or bag.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So knowledge, it's not that knowledge isn't powerful, but I think there has to be like an addition to the knowledge is power saying, which is applied knowledge is power.
Yeah.
Right. So, because there's a lot of people, and you see this, and I'm sure as much as I do, there's a lot of people in their professional lives that can sit in a room and they can have all the answers in the meeting.
Mm-hmm.
But then when it's time to go execute on the strategy,
Yeah.
they're lost.
I feel personally attacked on that one.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Right. But it also happens outside of the conference room
Mm-hmm.
every Sunday when football's on TV. There's a bunch of guys that
Mm-hmm.
can give great commentary and criticism on what that quarterback should have done differently.
Yeah.
But if you put a helmet and pads on them,
Yeah.
they are going to go to the hospital immediately.
Or if you have them coached, they fall under the pressure, that type of deal.
100%.
Yeah.
But then you, on the other side of that, you have people that can perform at a high level.
Mm-hmm.
Like, as an example, there are very few professional athletes that are in the Hall of Fame
Mm-hmm.
as an athlete and in the Hall of Fame as a coach.
Right.
Right. Because some people can play but can't coach. Some people can coach but can't play. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like there's a who was a really great coach. Actually, Coach K at Duke. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like he was a okay basketball player for Army. Is that right? Did he play for Army? Something like that.
We'll fact check it.
All
We'll
right.
fact
He
check
was, last ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he was a average at best.
Mm-hmm.
But then he's one of the greatest college coaches of all time.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Phil Jackson for the Bulls. He was a role player for the New York Knicks. He
Yeah.
wasn't a great player, but he's one of the greatest NBA coaches of all time,
Mm-hmm.
right? So, but the I guess the point to draw back to AI is that if you're not able to execute on the information,
Yes.
there's something one of my coaches, speaking of athletics, used to say to me is that to know and not to do is worse than not to know at all. Right?
Yeah.
So, and what he would say is, I would rather you be ignorant than apathetic.
Mm.
Right. I'd rather you make the mistake because you don't know what the heck you're doing and you're trying.
Yeah.
Than for you to know and then not do what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Right.
It certainly exists like on a spectrum.
Mm.
You could either ask ChatGPT for every single small problem you have, or you can ask it for none. So it's a balance, right? You don't want to be so over reliant on it that as soon as there's a bug in your house, you're, Googling or ChatGPTing or asking Siri how to deal with it.
Right.
It's like, just deal with it.
Yeah.
But you are at risk of basically not not being able to bring yourself to act on anything.
Yeah.
Because again, it puts us in the situation where we can solve any problem, not know how we solved it. We can get
Right.
all the information we want, but never act on it.
Right. So to answer the original question about the role that AI would play as a mentor,
Mm-hmm.
the way I would think about it is when I'm interacting with AI in particular as a mentor, I'm interacting for insights
Yeah.
and to help me think,
Mm-hmm.
not to give me answers.
Right.
because if it gives me an answer and I go do it, then I have to, and it
Be
works.
careful.
I've got to be relying on it. And
Yeah.
if I don't do it, I have to take the outcome, the negative outcome, but
Right.
I don't have to take the responsibility because I can blame the
You can
stupid
blame it.
internet,
Mm-hmm.
right? And so I think the question that we have to ask is it's no different than when we're having normal mentor mentee coaching conversations, or we're trying to get insights from humans, right? It's like I had this conversation with a leader a couple of weeks ago, and we were having coffee, and we were talking about, one of the things he was saying was like how he knows that he's not taking full advantage of AI, but he doesn't really know how.
Mm-hmm.
And so my question to him is, well, what if you relied on AI the same way you would on an intern,
Mm.
right? You don't assume that the intern has all the answers because you are the world's expert on you. You're with yourself 100% of the time. You talk to yourself more than you talk to anyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're the expert, then what if you relied on uh, AI like you did a intern and you said, "Hey, I need information.
Mm-hmm.
I'm trying to solve this problem. Here's the information that I need to know so that I can go execute on the information." Right?
Yeah.
So you are uh the captain of the ship,
Mm-hmm.
so to speak,
Yeah.
right? And no one in their right mind would hire an intern and then have the intern go present to the board
Yeah.
on their behalf,
Right.
right? Because the intern is not the expert. The
Right.
intern is a resource that you are giving value to them and they are giving value
Yeah.
to
You
you.
heard her
So
here first. People are resources.
yeah,
Just
yeah,
kidding.
yeah.
I'm just
Well,
kidding.
and when you're thinking about your development, they
They
are
are. They are.
resources.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
They're not the answer.
Right.
They're the support,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Um, the same way that like I wouldn't rely on my 13-year-old to give a presentation on my behalf,
Mm-hmm.
but I would have a conversation with her about her perspective that would inform the presentation that I give,
Yeah.
right? And I think that's the biggest thing that for me has been useful about AI is that I don't expect AI to solve the problem.
Mm-hmm.
I expect AI to support me as I solve the problem.
Yes. You said it. If you rely on it to solve the problem, you're handicapping your skill to do that in the future.
Mm-hmm.
Now you can sort of train yourself to maybe think about how it would break the problem down or something like that. Like I've noticed for some questions that I ask myself, I find myself simulating what ChatGPT would answer to me.
Right.
And that kind of helps just me think through problems
Yeah.
without, going. The outputs that I got maybe like the first time I was using ChatGPT like blew my mind. Now I sort of know what to expect from it when I'm asking it questions, and that can help me get to an answer. Or like you're saying, when you're in an AI chatbot, you don't have to ask for the answer. You can say, "What are some things to consider? What are some
Right.
other things to consider?"
Right.
So yeah, it depends on how you frame
Yeah.
the problem in that
Yeah.
way.
And it's almost like, especially if you've customized first, to be able to say, based on what you know about me
Mm-hmm.
and the other prompts that I've given you,
Mm-hmm.
what are some things that I would have been unlikely to consider
Yes.
as a alternative perspectives or options?
Mm-hmm.
Because if it knows, and this is one place where it can be supported from a inclusivity standpoint, right? Because I can only see through the lens of my experience,
Mm-hmm.
right? So me being a straight white American male,
Mm-hmm.
it is very improbable for me to have an embodied understanding of what it's like to take all of those variables and and be something else,
Something
right?
else. Yep.
So for me to say I understand the female perspective, the only way that I can say that with any certainty isn't because I embody it, it's because I have relationships with people and I have relationships that are trusting enough and have had enough conversations that I believe their stories.
Mm-hmm.
So when my wife tells me something, I can believe her experience,
Yep.
not because I have the experience, but because I trust her experience and I trust that she's telling me the truth of her experience.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's kind of the same thing as it relates to AI too, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. Um, so we can like go into like AI again can do everything. I think this is the fourth time I said that. But I was thinking about how do we draw the line, sort of?
Yeah.
Because as people are developing tools and using tools, right, there's clearly, as we've determined, a right way and a wrong way to use them. Wrong way is to copyright based off of other people's stuff and have the AI spit out a regurgitation of the existing stuff without people's permission. Wrong way would be to copy and paste all the outputs without validating them. Um, there's a right way to use it, which is to automate the boring stuff
Right.
and the soul sucking tasks. And so, what I've been pondering basically is that you can use AI for stuff that helps enhance the human connection
Mm.
as opposed to get rid of it, right? If you're just writing all your emails and stuff with AI, that's not helping the human connection piece. So I've just been trying to create my own framework in my head as far as like what we should be using AI for. So I was curious what your thoughts are on that.
Actually, I had an experience of that. I was communicating with someone from the UK,
Hmm.
and I've spent zero time in the UK. I have plenty of people that I've known from there,
Hmm.
and have had relationships with, but I don't have any lived experience there, right?
Yeah.
And so it was a pretty detailed email that I was sending. And so one of the things I did is I put my email in, and the prompts were, I'm sending an email to a person who is in this role. This is the reason, this is the context, this is what I'm hoping to accomplish as a result. Now take out all American language and context and change it and make the switch to be more relevant to
Mm.
the European culture
Yeah.
without taking away my voice,
Yeah.
right?
Your tone, your
Right,
style. Yeah.
right.
Hmm.
And so one example was, and I had made it really detailed. I used some symbolism and some metaphor, and one of the metaphors was a football metaphor.
Oh,
So it
you
switched
mean
to
soccer?
well,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. So and it did. It took out my American football
American
metaphor
football. Yeah.
and input
Hmm.
a European football or a
Yep.
soccer metaphor, right?
Hmm.
And so for those things, it helps us connect.
Hmm.
It helps us to relate. It can
Yeah.
help us to make more valuable or quicker connections with people.
Hmm.
But if it had given I have a relevance to soccer,
Yeah.
European football.
Hmm.
But had I been communicating with someone from South Africa, as an example, and it
Hmm.
had switched my football metaphor to rugby,
Hmm.
or with someone from India and it switched it to cricket, I
Cricket.
don't know anything about those two sports. So if I had my next uh, uh, connection with that person had been a conversation, and they go, "Oh, I had no idea you were a cricket fan,"
Yeah.
I would have right.
You get
So
exposed.
right.
Get
So
exposed.
in some contexts, it can increase our connection.
Hmm.
In others, we run the risk of losing trust and
Yep.
credibility.
Yep.
Right. And so I think it's a delicate, it's almost a moment by moment sort of
Hmm.
a decision that we have to, there's not a line.
Yeah.
Like the goalpost moves
It
on
moves.
every single time, but it moves in every single conversation that we have in person with people, because
Hmm.
we're always at risk when people say something. It's easy for us to just go, yeah, 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 even though we have no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. It's the
Like I'm doing
same
right now.
thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
It's the same thing though.
Yeah. Same
You know
thing.
what I mean? Because this is something that happens professionally with people all the time, is somebody might be talking over your head and you're just going,
Hmm.
yeah, 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 yeah. And they go, you got it? Yeah, I got it. And then you walk away going, I have no idea.
Next week they ask you for the thing and you don't have it, and then you have to explain it. Yeah. As my dad told me 3 billion times when I was growing up, it's all about balance.
Hmm.
With everything in life, it's all about balance.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. And the tough thing about AI is that the knowledge there's a disparity in knowledge and experience when it comes to AI,
Hmm.
right? And if if we're not very careful, then AI can be just as big of a detriment as it can be a benefit to us.
Exactly.
And that's not just professionally, but that's also personally.
Hmm.
And it and and disengaging from it is, I think, equally as risky,
Hmm.
right? It's the equivalent of not your kids never having a computer or a phone or a tablet or a screen or not having a TV in your house,
Yeah.
and then sending them out and expecting them to go into society and be a functioning adult,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's not the world we live in anymore.
Hmm.
You know,
Well, one thing, this is very biased opinion, so I will admit that right now,
all
but
opinions are
all
biased.
opinions are biased. So, but mine is especially biased. So with every technological revolution ever, with the cotton mill, right? They used to hand spin cotton, then there was a cotton mill. The argument was that's gonna like ruin this like
Yeah.
industry. Same thing with the automotive
Yep.
industry. They were like they're metal death traps. We don't want them on the
Well, they
roads.
thought
They
it
should be
would
illegal.
scramble your brain if you went faster than 60 miles an hour,
Yeah, yeah.
you know?
Yeah. With the dot-com boom, same thing. With all of these technological revolutions, there's a book by Carlotta Perez. I forget what it's called, but the name is something like that. And it's it's always the same cycle of adoption, resistance, and then you hit the top where everyone starts to adopt the thing. So I do think that people are doing themselves a disservice by resisting AI, and like even if you don't use it, you should just know what the limitations are.
Hmm.
So yeah, that's really important.
Yeah. And I think sometimes there are some people that are more there is, I forget what it's called. Then there's like the bell curve where it's
Hmm.
like um the early adopters, the late
Yeah.
adopters, right? The majority, uh and then all the way down to like the laggards. Like the
Yeah.
laggards are the people that would, like, if you could find VHS tapes, they would still use VHS,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
Or the people like my grandfather was like this. Like I can remember my grandfather, who was born in 1930, going, "Yeah, I'm pretty sure this internet thing's a fad. Like it's
Yeah.
not gonna." And I remember he finally broke down and bought a fax machine.
Wow.
This is like in the 90s, right? He broke
Those were
down.
cool to have a fax
Oh,
machine
dude,
in
it
your
was the best.
house. That was
Yeah.
yeah.
Well, we had it in our in his business,
Oh, okay,
right?
okay.
And
Still
it was like,
new.
and he was so frustrated
Hmm.
because he couldn't control when people sent him faxes, and he was like, they're wasting my paper,
Wow.
right? Because that paper, I paid for that,
Yeah.
so they're using my money to bother me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he would still like this, and I'll show you this thing
Hmm.
to this was our this was a cash register,
Wow.
right? Like this is what, and at the risk of making noise in the microphone,
Look
this
at
thing
this
right
thing.
here. So this thing right here, it this is how we used to transact, right? So this was the cash register. So there was three pieces of paper that went in here, and this is where you wrote your invoice, and
Hmm.
everything set inside of this thing, and you write it, you do this, it'd come out, you pull it out, you tear it, the
Wow.
customer would sign it,
Hmm.
and then it would give you three copies.
Because it's the carbon
Yep,
paper.
carbon
Yeah.
paper.
Hmm.
Yep.
Want to
And
show the front to
oh
the.
yeah, yeah, this thing right here.
Yeah.
And this thing was, I mean, we transacted on this thing for 40 years,
Wow.
you
Yeah.
know? And the like and the thing that he had a hard time like justifying was like an inventory management system at our
Hmm.
furniture store, right?
Yeah.
Because he's like, I know what I have,
Hmm.
right? And that was something that was important to him, that if you don't know how many of every product you have in the warehouse, you don't know your business.
It's tied to his identity.
A hundred
Hmm.
percent.
Yeah.
And now there's no way you could run a business
Hmm.
like that today Now, well, maybe you could not as not successfully,
Not as
or you
efficiently.
certainly couldn't scale it, right?
Yeah, yeah,
So can you get through the world as it stands without technology? Probably, but it's the equivalent of going, these cars are probably
yeah.
this is a fad.
This is a
You know what I
fad.
mean?
Yeah,
But there's a lot of people that uh there's a lot of people that used to breed horses that were out of a job,
yeah.
and
Out of a job.
I couldn't fault someone who was a horse breeder when the Model T came out.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't fault them for going, this is stupid.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? If they're risking. But I think that's kind of an evolutionary misunderstanding that we have, which is, they like the only the strong survive thing,
mm-hmm.
which isn't the case. It's not about the strong surviving, because if it was, there would just be T-Rexes.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? There would just be dinosaurs.
mm-hmm.
It wasn't about the strong surviving, it was about the most adaptable,
Yeah,
right? So the horse breeders that survived when the cars became more popular, it wasn't they just had to go out and find new professions. The ones that adapted and started selling horses with a different story
mm-hmm.
and selling for luxury and not for day to day to get from here to the 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 market and back. It
Yeah,
was okay, so the world has changed. So how can I adapt based on my skill set?
mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure that there's going to be as much of a mass impact on people's jobs as some people are predicting. Maybe I'm wrong,
Mm-hmm.
but I think that there will be some for sure. But that happened with cars, that happened with computers, that happened with the printing press, that
Steam
happened.
engine, printing press. Yep.
That's right. That happened. That has happened. That happened with like even the way that, just to stay on the theme of cars, that happened with how cars were manufactured
Mm-hmm.
with
Mm-hmm.
the assembly line, right?
Yep.
Because before, cars were they were only for the most affluent,
Yes.
right? And the Model T wasn't the first car. It
Right.
wasn't. It was the first car that the average person could
Goodbye.
afford,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
They
like,
started with the high tier price and then went down and down and down with
that's
the
right.
yeah
That's
the
right.
models.
That's right. And that was the genius of Henry Ford, is he brought the the automobile to the masses.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's not so much about, is AI going to replace me, I think, as much, because I mean you and I have had this conversation about, because that's one of the first AI conversations we had was,
Yeah.
what are you seeing for the coaching and training industry?
Mm-hmm.
Because like I hear the rumblings in my industry of like, well, no one's going to need to help in presentation coaching if they can just say it into a screen and then get the inputs. But what they're not getting is a certain level of certain contextual coaching
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
that AI is not yet able to do. And so as long as you're cooperating with the inevitable and making the adjustments and taking and adjusting your skill set to the need of the market,
Yeah.
then that's actually the safest place to be.
Mm-hmm.
And not saying, well, turns out I'm going to have to go back to school and become a programmer, because
Yeah.
being dyslexic, I'm screwed.
You're screwed.
Yeah, I'm super screwed. Yeah.
Yeah, and like take public speaking for example. That is something that even if AI could like show you a picture of a bunch of people looking at you, it's not the same. It doesn't give you the same emotions and the same hormones don't flow through your body as when you're public speaking in real life. That's
Mhm.
intrinsically a human experience that
Mhm.
AI cannot replicate.
Right.
And in the future, can it? I don't know. Probably not. Probably
Well,
not for the meaningful.
when we become the technology, maybe,
Maybe,
right?
yeah.
When we fully integrate,
Fully integrate, yeah.
maybe,
When we're
maybe.
plugged into the system like the Matrix, for sure.
Right, right. But I think we've got probably a few years, and
Yeah,
and
yeah.
there's a lot of time to adjust.
Yeah, and a lot of professionals, the sentiment goes, AI is not going to take your job. People that use AI will.
Uh,
And the idea is that these people are going to be so efficient, they're going to be AI powered superhumans. Um, I tend to agree with that position. I tend to agree with that. But at the same time, again, there's things that are intrinsically human you can't automate.
hmm,
So one of the things I'm working on is like automating the stuff in the background that, again, is the soul sucking tasks that nobody wants to do, like sorting through all my emails or
right.
something. So I'll have like AI do that. I have some flow that runs in the background and tells me, for example, it'll detect trends based on like what I'm interested in. It's like a custom tool I built.
Hmm,
So um, that is something that is kind of soul sucking. Maybe you agree or disagree. Like
I
just
agree.
just reading through your emails, most of the stuff you don't care about.
Right.
You might get advertisements that people just want your money, etc. Right? So it would be good to delegate that to an AI.
Right.
What we can't delegate it is building your own skills.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And it that kind of speaks to the research about presentation skills. Like
Mm-hmm.
what the research indicates is the number one indicator for a person's mobility in their career isn't education, credential, IQ, intelligence, or even experience. It is presentation skills.
Mm.
Because most of the time, for most people, their boss, their manager, they're not seeing them do their work. The way that they evaluate how they're doing isn't in watching them do their work, it's
Mm-hmm.
in hearing them present on the work they've done.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, I see this all the time. People get stuck in kind of the middle part of organizations, that you look at the person and you're like, they are infinitely more skilled, more efficient, more effective, more productive
Mm-hmm.
than people that are two or three levels above them, but they're stuck here. And it's not a matter of their competency as much as this is a matter of their communication.
Yeah, and that is a skill in itself.
100%.
You could either tell your boss, "Oh, I just made some automation on the side," or you can say, "I built this thing that's never been done before at the company. It's going to save us 10 hours a week. It's going to do this and this, tell a compelling story." And like that's just human psychology. It'll
Right.
register in their brain more and yeah, that
Yeah.
that can certainly help you
Yeah.
out for sure.
So talk for a second about some of the things that you're putting out. One of the reasons
Yeah.
why I reached out for us to have this conversation
Yeah.
was, um, it kind of goes back to what I talk about, and how to you don't go find mentors, you attract mentors,
Mhm.
right? And the thing that mentors are attracted to are people that are already doing the work, right? No mentor wants to pull someone up off of a sofa and then drag them across their own finish line,
Yeah.
right? They go, oh, they're already doing the work. So I know that my investment in that person is going to give me the return that I'm looking for.
Right.
And that is compelling to mentors, right? And
Yeah.
so, I know you and I had like personal conversations, private conversations about AI and all that stuff. But the thing that made me want to go like, okay, I want to have a conversation that is publicly consumable, is because you're doing the work and you're putting out really good content.
That's
So,
yeah, the new thing for me is shameless plug. I have a YouTube channel. I'm trying to give away all the secrets like that I use with AI. Basically to help people avoid making the same mistakes I did, which we've discussed a lot of them already.
yep.
I also want to automate a lot of the stuff in the background. So I'm going to geek out here for a little bit,
Yeah.
but using this low code, no code automation platform called make.com, similar to Zapier if you've ever used
Yeah.
it, or Microsoft Power Automate. So basically, it connects a bunch of your tools together that typically aren't connectable. Like if you have a Fitbit and a note-taking app, and you want to integrate AI and have AI like encourage you like on days that you haven't worked out, for example, and like log when you're working out in your note-taking app, like you can't do that today.
Yeah.
So that's what make.com enables is you can the customization. You can build your own custom solution, whatever tools you use you can build your own personal AI assistant for
Right.
that, and it all works in the background. Everything is like on a trigger, so you can run stuff like once a day. Maybe you have it look through your emails once a day. Maybe you have it listening for new newsletters.
Mm.
So that's, for example, mine is listening for new trends related to AI chatbots like ChatGPT.
Yeah.
So that's something that yes, I could look through all the newsletters and read through all the sites myself, but I want the AI to do that in the background for me. So that's the system I'm building. That's the content that I'm putting out,
Yeah.
is like how other people can do that, because I just realized with AI there has to be a better way
Right.
to do a lot of the stuff that we're still doing.
Yeah.
In the same way, there's an old book. It's called "Automate the Boring Stuff with Python."
Mm.
I think it was released in like 2017, or that was at least the copy that I had. Maybe it was re-released then, but the whole idea was to automate stuff like renaming files and how, like, just stuff that humans shouldn't be doing.
Right.
And so I kind of looked at this as a new forefront for a new automate your life, automate the boring stuff type of deal. So that's what I'm focused on right now.
Mm. So I'll put out in the description to this, I'll put your LinkedIn, your YouTube channel.
Yeah,
Is there anywhere else people should?
just the YouTube is the main one. It's
Yeah.
just my name, Ben Attanasio. I have a school community that I started, which is a paid community. So it's for people who take the low code, no code automation stuff seriously.
Cool.
It's called Automate Your Life. I probably should change the name because I that's not really what we're trying to do. We're not trying to automate everything.
Yeah.
It's just, again, automating the boring stuff is what it's
It's almost
focused
like
on.
automating for life.
For
Automating
life.
so you can have a
So you
life.
can have
Yeah.
a life,
Yeah.
exactly.
See, look,
Thank you.
problem
Yeah.
solved.
Yeah. Now I can update my, materials. Thank
That's
you.
awesome. That's awesome. Man, this was fun.
It
Thank you
was
for
great.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you
Thank
for
you for
having me.
for sure. For sure.
Awesome.